Well, thank you for the likes already. Hey, Sarah, welcome in. Good afternoon. How are you, Cam? I was wondering when you'd show up, Crazy Mama. I don't expect a lot of people today, which is perfectly fine. I'm doing all right. It's been a good day so far. Thank you. Thank you. 51 today. I have successfully leveled up. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you guys. Wow. Catching up to me. Thank you, Wings. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, I have 4 stories for this live, and it was kind of like I picked them at random. Thank you so much. So, I have no idea if they're any good, but I guess we're going to find out. Hey, Skynot Star, how are you? Hey, Gam Gam, how are you? Oh, well, happy birthday to your son. We're birthday buddies. Naomi, so this week is my birthday week, so I decided to go live every day. And today is my actual birthday, and I'm going to be busy tonight, so I figured I would come on and do a lunchtime live. Thank you. Reading to me? No. See, that's the thing. I love doing this. So if I'm going to do something on my birthday, it's going to be this. Because I enjoy doing it so much. So I am enjoying the day, Amy. I am glad that I'm on right now, and I'm glad that you guys are here. I'm so happy that I get to hang out with you guys for a little while. It was funny. I was looking at it last night, and we got to 13.8 thousand followers last night, which is so cool. Is secretly watching from work. Well, hello, friend who is secretly watching from work. Don't get in trouble. Brain. I still have responsibilities that I have to take care of today. But I will be hanging out with my best friend tonight, so I'm happy about that. It's thank you, Lynn. It's the 4th year in a row that we've hung out on my birthday. So, and she lives in Washington State. So, I have 4 stories today. I kind of picked them at random out of a handful of these anthologies that I picked up the other day. So we'll see if they're any good. Yeah, I've been up since 9 o'clock this morning, which is like kind of amazing. No Stephen King today. I do have tomorrow night is going to be a fun night because I'll be reading a Clive Barker story for the first time. It's I don't know if anybody is a reader of Barker, but um, the story is called The Body Politic, and it's from the book The Inhuman Condition, which it was also collected in the Books of Blood Volume 4. It is an excellent story. It is really unsettling. I love it. I'm usually on, so this is because this is a unique week. I'm on every day this week. But I'm usually on Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 p.m. Eastern. This week, I'll be on today from 12 to 2, and then tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I'll be on 9 to 11 Eastern Standard. Hey, Sunshine, how are you? I am super happy that you're here, too. Thank you so much. Well, there are 52 people in the room right now, which is really cool. It's more than I was expecting, so I'm happy. I am going to go ahead and get started, because it is 12:07. This page, I do live storytelling. Read short stories of all kinds. And on Sundays, I read, we do Sunday night bedtime stories, which is generally family-friendly chapter books. Most recently, we did Charlotte's Web. So, if that sounds like something you like, please give me a follow. And I've got a great community of people that I just love dearly. And we rally around each other, and it's really wonderful. Yeah, Katie, I was thinking about that. I've got several viewers in Europe, and I kind of figured some of them might find me today, so which is pretty cool. Well, thank you. I'm glad you're here. All right, so I'm kind of winging it this week. I don't have a show script for this week, so I'm kind of just winging it. Oh, Carmen, so welcome in. This is pretty much just it's essentially a live audiobook. I do short stories during the week. Well, David, wonderful. I'm glad you you showed up on your FYP. That's pretty cool. TikTok doesn't always distribute my live, which is interesting. So, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this special lunchtime edition of Storytime with UndeadPapa. Well, hi, Nikki. Welcome from the UK. Where in the UK are you? My daughter lives in, my youngest daughter, she's 18. She lives in Liverpool with her mom. Hello from Texas, Maya. How are you? So I have 4 stories today. There are a variety of stories, and most of them are from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Yorkshire. Okay. There was somebody in here last night that was from Yorkshire. So... But yeah, I've had Norway, Sweden, Spain, Puerto Rico, Alaska. Yeah, it's pretty wild who comes in. Hey, Perps, how are you? So California, cool. Have a lot of Pacific Northwest people. So it's pretty cool. Jersey in the house. Oh, hey, from the UK. Yes, Michigan. Yep, Oregon. And my best friend is in Washington State. She's in Vancouver, just across the border from Portland. Relatable here. I am doing very well. How are you? A lot of Chicago people in the house today. Nice. West Virginia, Poconos, Pennsylvania. Wonderful. Pennsylvania is always so wild to drive through because it's like the northern Pennsylvania is like all just like curvy roads and mountains. All right, so our first story, Spokane, Washington. Awesome. Jeez, Chicago is representing today. Northern Illinois. Wonderful. Well, I'm glad I'm glad you're here, Barb. All right. So our first story was first published in November of 1955 in Playboy magazine. It's called "Burnt Toast" by Mac Reynolds. I look like Jack Black. I have gotten that before. All right. So let's get started. We have here a table bearing 13 cocktails, the demon said. And now, into one, I add a touch from this vial. What's that? Poison. Now, I switched the glasses about. Truly, you couldn't remember into which glass I emptied the vial, could you? What's the gag, buddy? The proposition, the demon said, is quite simple. You take your pick and drink it. For your first choice, I give you exactly $100. Yes, button. Sorry. Dope! I actually have visuals today. So, Ellen Sheriff shook his head in an attempt to clear away the fog. You said a minute ago you put poison in just one. There are 13 in all. You choose a glass, you drink it, and I award you with $100. If you wish to try again, you receive 200. Next award is 400, and so on. If you lose, the forfeit is your life and your soul. It took a long moment to assimilate that. Let's see the century, Sheriff muttered. The demon brought forth a wallet and selected a bill which he had laid on the table, then looked at the other in anticipation. Sheriff said thickly, Nothing to lose, anyway. He took up the nearest glass, fished the olive out, and threw it aside. The demon smiled politely. Bottoms up, Sheriff said, tossing it off with the practiced stiff wrist motion of the drinker. He put the glass down, stood swaying in silence. Not bad liquor, he said, finally. I needed that. The $100 is yours. Would you like to try for 200? Sheriff looked at the bill. This is good, eh? The demon shifted his shoulders in impatience. Of course, Sheriff said. Suppose I could ask you what this is all about, but the hell with it. So long, sucker. I'll be here tomorrow, Alan Sheriff. There was a knock, and the demon said, Come in. Sheriff closed the door behind him. His blood-veined eyes went about the barren hotel room. Magnet drawn, they came to the small table. 12 cocktail glasses, sweated with cold, sat upon it. He said, tentatively, I was tight last night. The night before last, the demon corrected. But I wasn't that tight. I could have dreamed it, especially the $100. Already gone, I assume? The demon said. You came to try again. Why'd you give me that 100? Listen, you haven't got a drink around the place, have you? The other seated himself in the room's sole chair, put the tips of his fingers together. You won the $100 on a wager. As far as a drink is concerned, I'm afraid all I have is there. He indicated the table with its burden of 12 glasses. Sheriff's eyes went from him to the table and back again. He hadn't shaved since last he'd been here, and the pallor and odor of long weeks of alcohol, were on him. He wavered. I don't remember too well. Briefly, the demon said, I represent interests that desire your immortal soul. He made again the proposition of the previous evening while Sheriff stared at him. When he was finished, his visitor's eyes went again to the table with its 12 glasses. Let's see your money, Sheriff said, shaky and unbelieving. The demon brought forth his wallet, extracted 2 bills. Sheriff stepped to the table, reached for a drink. Prosit, he grunted, bolting it. He waited, then with satisfaction, Wrong one. The demon shrugged. Sheriff said, If I take another one, how much do I get? $400. You wish to try again? There's 11 glasses left. 1 poison, eh? That is correct. The odds are with you. Sheriff grinned sourly, 2 broken front teeth becoming evident. Best odds I ever had. He reached out quickly, took up another glass, held it in his hand for a moment, then drank it as he had the other one with one quick motion. 400 more, he demanded, and received it. And now for 8, the demon prodded. Not till I get this spent, Sheriff chortled. Then I'll be back, sucker. He held up the 600 he had won, stared at it unbelievingly, clenched it in his fist, and stumbled from the room. The demon looked after him. 800 this time, the demon said, the sum already in his hand, and the odds are 1 in 10. Here's to glory, Sheriff toasted. When Ellen's sheriff returned 4 days later, he was shaven, bathed, attired in gray flannel. His teeth had known a dentist's attention, and the shaking of his hands was all but imperceptible. You're sober, the demon said. Sheriff looked at him. The other was medium-sized, dressed conservatively. Sheriff said, You don't look like the devil. How am I supposed to look? Sheriff scowled at him. Listen, I sobered myself up, but it's temporary. Just long enough to find out what the hell's going on. What'd you give me that money for? The demon explained, still again, the wagers they made. Afterward, Sheriff said, not the sheriff, wonderingly, My soul, eh? Tell the truth. I didn't think there was any such thing. It has been greatly debated, the demon agreed. What I can't understand, Sheriff said, is all this trouble you're going to. You picked me out of the gutter. You would have got my soul anyway. You underestimates the efforts of your opposition, the demon, efforts of our opposition. Holy cow. Let me try that sentence again. You underestimate the efforts of our opposition, the demon sighed, and you must realize victory is never absolutely assured until the last second of your life. 10 minutes after I approached you, you might have decided upon reform. He twisted his mouth sardonically. Sheriff shook his head while saying, I still don't get this system of trying to get my soul. The demon had seated himself in the armchair. Now he shrugged. Each person in his time is confronted with his decision, most admittedly not quite so directly as this. But all that dough for a down and out bum, Already I've got 1,500, and the next chance more than doubles it. The demon nodded. Your next try is for 1,600, but the amount is meaningless. The, commodity can't be evaluated in terms of money. One of our most prized specimens cost about 30 pieces of silver, he added absently. In that particular case, he didn't know it was his soul he was selling. Alan Sheriff looked down at the table. There were 9 glasses remaining. He said, For $1,600, eh? The demon nodded, his eyes shining. Sheriff's hand snaked out, took up a glass, and brought it halfway to his lips. His eyes went to the demon's. The other smiled. Alan Sheriff put the glass down quickly, took up another. He held it for a moment. The demon still smiled. Sheriff's mouth tightened. Salud, he said, bolting the cocktail. He closed his eyes and waited. When he opened them, the other was extending a sheaf of bills. Sheriff said, You'll still be here later in the week? For you, I will always be here, night or day. There are 8 glasses left. Your next wager will involve 3,200. Sheriff said flatly, I gave up 2 weeks ago. Lots of dough for liquor, good food, gambling, makes the going easier, but I'm not changing my mind about calling life quits. I'll be back when I've spent this. Very sound judgment, the demon nodded. Until then. So soon, the demon said. However, the wager is now 3,200. Sheriff said, This is the last time. This time I'm using the dough for a new start. I'm getting a job. Admirable motive, I understand from the human viewpoint. However, we shall see. The demon changed the subject. If I understand correctly the laws of chance, this is your crucial test. How's that? Sheriff's eyes came up from the glasses to the other's face. When we began, there were 13 glasses, one of which was poisoned. However, we are nearly half through now, and your good luck cannot last forever. Taking the averages, you should miss this time. Sheriff shook his head. Each time is a separate time. You don't use up your luck. There is no such thing. The odds aren't as good as they were, but they're still 7-1 in my favor. Very well. Let us see. Alan Sheriff, sweat on his forehead, reached out slowly for one of the martinis. Here's looking at you, he said. The demon answered the door and smiled to see his visitor. Alan Sheriff, but I thought your last visit was to be just that. Sheriff's face was tight. I'm not here for myself, damn you. It's for somebody else. Somebody else, the demon said. I don't understand. A girl, Sheriff snapped. It's one of your business. You wouldn't never have seen me again except for Muriel. She needs 5,000. Medical bills for her old lady's sanitarium. Never mind. The thing is, I'll take another one of those drinks. The demon pinched his lip thoughtfully. I don't know. Damn it, what difference does it make what I want the dough for? Your motive for taking the wager disturbs me. Some centuries ago, a somewhat similar case precipitated a cause célèbre, chap named Johann Faust. Matter had to be taken to the higher authorities. However, let us see what develops. There are 7 glasses. Your odds are 6 to 1, with the prize amounting to exactly $6,400. Sheriff took up a glass at random, toasted defiantly. Here's to the ladies. Very sentimental, the demon nodded. The sheriff banged on the door heavily, and before it could be answered, banged again. The demon opened it, his face quizzical. Ah, our Alan Sheriff. Sheriff lurched to the table. The martini glasses stood as before, 6 of them remaining. They appeared chill and as fresh as the first time he had seen them months ago. What's the bet now? He slurred. The wager is 12,800 against your life and soul. The demon's voice was soft. Okay, here's how. The demon nodded pleasantly. Beat you again, Sheriff sneered. Give me the dough. I'm on my way to show up a wise guy. Show him what a real spender can do for a girl. The alcohol was heavy on his breath. What'd be a classy present for Muriel? Show her what a real guy does for a dame. The demon ran a thoughtful thumbnail along his trimmed mustache. I understand mink is highly thought of, he murmured. Ah, the demon said. Here we are once again. Sheriff looked about the room, unchanged from the last time he had been here, except there were but five glasses on the small table. He wondered vaguely what had happened to the 8 glasses he'd emptied in turn. You know, he said, each time I come here I have to be convinced all over again that it's true. Indeed. As I recall, on your last visit, you were in the midst of a somewhat feverish romantic situation. Did you take my advice as to the desirability of mink? Sheriff was gazing in fascination. He said, What? Oh, yeah, this here wise guy boyfriend of hers, old high school sweetheart kind of crap, was trying to beat my time. He chuckled thickly. But I gave her the old rush job, wound up in Miami Beach for a week. Quite a town. Isn't it, though? And where is Muriel these days? Sheriff was tired of the subject. She's around somewhere. Got on my nerves finally. What's the bet now? I'm thinking of going into the restaurant business with my kid brother. He needs the dough to get started. 25,600, the demon said briefly. Well, here's mud in your eye, Sheriff said. 51,200, the demon said. The new business doesn't seem to prosper. The kid doesn't realize there's angles to every business. He's too slow for me. We needed this dough to put in a bar and maybe a few tables and some slots in the back. Maybe some rooms upstairs where a guy can take a dame or maybe throw a little reefer party. There are now 4 glasses, the demon said. Skull! The demon opened the door at the knock and admitted the burly, heavy-faced man. It's been a long time, he said simply. Yeah, Sheriff said. He looked about the small room. But you haven't changed much. Neither has this room. I wasn't sure it'd still be here. Some things are changeless, the demon said. 3 glasses left, eh? My luck's been really with me thus far. You know, it's been a long since I've been here. What's the bet now? You would win $102,400. My friend, 2 chances out of 3. It's still a good percentage, and I'm branching out into new territory and need the dough. He stared down at the identical glasses, still retaining their appearance of chill freshness. And how is your brother these days? Bill? Hell with him. I had to bounce him out. Too square for the business I'm in. You know? He bragged. I'm a pretty big shot in some of these rackets these days. Ah, I see. Sheriff took up one of the glasses, looked over its edge at his opponent. Well, first one today with this hand, he muttered, downing it. He waited for a moment, then took up the money, stuffed it into his overcoat pocket, and left without a backward glance. The knock at the door was hurried, anxious. The demon opened it and said, Yes? Sheriff hastened in, looked about quickly. I'm safe here? The demon chuckled. Really, Alan Sheriff? They're after me, the cops. Ah. Sheriff's eyes went to the small table. 2 glasses left, he muttered. I could hire labor out for a lawyer, grease a few palms. With more than 200 grand, I could beat this rap. Or, for that matter, I could go down to Mexico, live there the rest of my life. It's been done, the demon agreed. 50-50 chance, Sheriff hissed in sudden decision. He lifted one of the glasses from the table and said, Cheers! Downed it and stood back to wait, his face empty and white. Nothing happened. He turned to the other. Give me the money, he said triumphantly. You know what, sucker? It's like you said once. It's never too late to change. I beat you all the way down the line, but I know when I've pushed my luck as far as it'll go. After I've got myself out of this jam, I'm going to straighten up, see? I doubt it, the demon murmured. Yes, I am, Buster. You've lost this boy. The demon said, I suggest you drink the other martini. The other stared at him. That's the one with the poison. The demon shook his head gently. I suggest you take the 13th glass, Alan Sheriff. It might help you somewhat in the tribulations that lie ahead. After all, it is the very best of gin and vermouth. Sheriff chuckled his contempt. Give me my dough, sucker. I'm out. The demon said, What gave you the impression that the poison was a quick-acting one, Alan Sheriff? Sheriff blinked at him. Huh? I don't remember informing you that death was to be instantaneous following your choice of the wrong glass. I don't get it. But of course you got it, the demon said smoothly. The poison was odorless and tasteless, and you got it on your 8th try. Since then, your life and soul have been mine to collect at will. The fact that I haven't done so sooner was my own whim, and excellent business as it developed. Surely, in the past few years, you have done more for the, cause I serve than you would have had I collected my wager immediately. After a long moment, Sheriff picked up the last glass. Maybe you're right. I might be needing this, and they are good martinis. One for the road, he toasted with attempted bravado. Down the hatch, the demon corrected. Well, that was an interesting one. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. Mac Reynolds is a really good writer. I've got more of his, but not today. Well, thank you, Grandma D9. How are you? Oh, Trista, good to see you back. Same with you, Perps. Good to see you. I just saw you guys last night. All right. So, this next story, my favorite author, that one's a toss up. I would say it's a toss up between Stephen King and Philip K. Dick. Um, yeah. Yep. I mean, I've read some recent authors that I like. That I have read David Sodergren, Nat Cassidy, Nick Cutter, Ronald Malfi, Paul Tremblay, um, Anya Alborn. Um, they're all very, very good. I actually haven't read any James Patterson, but at your recommendation, I have put him on my list. He's on my to read list now. There's another horror author that I really enjoy. His name is Brian Keene. Uh, Writes some really cool zombie fiction, which is, that's my jam. Zombies are my jam. Frost, I am having a great day. And part of that, no lie, is because I'm hanging out with you guys. So, this next story was originally published in Famous Science Fiction in the spring of 1967. So, yes, I have read Joe Hill. Um, I have mixed feelings. I didn't really like. He's not bad. Technically speaking, he's a good writer. Um, Thank you, Oklahoma Girl. But I think in some instances he is trying too hard to be his father. Um, I've read Nosferatu and Heart Shaped Box are the two of his that I've read, and they were good, but they didn't really impress me. So, um, it's certainly possible. I mean, well, here's the thing. I had so many people that were like, "You gotta read these two. You gotta read his work," and I did. I was really looking forward to reading them, and they just didn't impress me. But like I said, they weren't bad. They were good, and like I said, he's a technically proficient writer. Um, he definitely has that talent from his father. But I think, like I said, I think in some cases he's trying too hard to be his father. Barb, no, no apologies needed. I don't mind chatting between stories. That's why I don't try to fill the whole 2 hours with stories, so I can take time and do this kind of thing, which is cool. But I am going to get back to reading. So this next story, like I said, was first published in 1967. It is called Dust by Wallace West. Wings I have not. Chapter 1. My city editor dipped the end of his ruler into a paste pot, withdrew a big white gob, and nibbled at it while he surveyed me from under his eye shade. "We're working up a so-called science series for the magazine section, Ralph," he said after swallowing. "You handle it. Give the old end of the world hokum another whirl to take readers' minds off their troubles. Maybe Earth will explode, like you're going to do if you keep eating that awful stuff, I said as he reached toward the pot once more. Maybe, but it tastes good. Wintergreen flavor. Well, interview some alleged experts and keep in touch with me like accounting will keep in touch with your expense account. The first interviews were fun. An astronomer told me the end would come when the sun collided with a wandering star. A seismologist guessed that earthquakes might lay us low. A bacteriologist predictably predicted plague. Then the office boy suggested that I call Hay Norworth, the oceanographer who was conducting some semi-hush-hush experiments in the Bahamas. What can an oceanographer say about the end of the world? I bribed Jimmy with a stick of gum. Tidal wave, maybe? For answer, Jimmy dialed Miss Norworth's number. Ralph Marvin of the Inquirer? Answered a tired voice. What do you want? I'm frightfully busy. I explained. End of the world? The voice rose to a pitch of fury. Don't ask me. Look out the nearest window. Bang. Seemed kind of peeved. Jimmy had listened in. We walked to one of the city room's few windows, but saw nothing unusual. An October sun shone with brownish-red glare on New York skyscrapers. Things had a moldy look, but that was due to a higher-than-usual nitrogen oxide level. The Times air pollution index had been hovering around 49 all day. Must be some kind of nut, Jimmy grinned. Say, look how thick this dust is. He wrote James Matthew Casey on the window sill with a fingertip. Cleaning women on strike? At that, I dug nostril filter plugs out of my pocket, grabbed my hat, and headed for the elevator. Thought you'd be coming, said an attractive, gray-haired young old woman as I entered her Midtown Manhattan office an hour later. But it's no use. I don't talk for publication anymore. It's too late. But, Miss Norworth, you've talked in the past. I fished through the file cabinet that is a reporter's memory. Back in the late 60s, you warned of water and air pollution dangers. The Inquirer played up the story until readers got bored, just as they had earlier about radioactive fallout. Right. Your paper was nice to us. She smiled for the first time, and I realized that if the weariness were discounted, her face was lovely. Folks were worried for a bit, then they took up smoking again and began fretting about, what was it, the deadly effects of coffee and tea. That's when I became interested in finding out whether humans can live on the sea floor. To escape the caffeine habit? I chuckled. Say, I could use that. Listen. Frowning, she picked up a sheaf of newspaper clippings and began reading the headlines. Dust pneumonia epidemic hits Texas. Asthma attacks cause thousands to flee New Orleans. Dust storm sweeps Cincinnati. Drought cuts Niagara Flow in half. Canadian wheat crop a failure. Atlantic Ocean levels rise 3 inches. You can't expect me to dig up that horse, I protested. Pollution is a dead issue. Here's news from abroad, she answered grimly. Red snow buries Angora. Drought forces Hong Kong exodus. China famine worst in history. Dust drifts block Trans-Siberian Railroad. And this is only the middle of October. Dr. Norworth sighed. Can you imagine what's going to happen when the heating season starts and November's winds begin to blow? No, You can't." She held up a slim hand. "You've been conditioned to ignore pollution as a nuisance and nothing more. Wear your nose plugs and your goggles. You'll be all right, fella. That's why I issue no more germades. When I was getting my doctorate, the debacle might have been stopped. We could have cleaned up our rivers, planted the Dust Bowl and forage crops, banned incinerators and leaf burning, used electric autos for driving in town, that sort of thing. It would have cost the taxpayers money they would rather spend on liquor, so nothing much happened in the long run. Now it's too late." "Why?" My spine was a ridgepole for icicles. "Because if computers don't lie, dust storms, the 7-year drought, and air and water pollutants will peak together this winter. Complicating the situation are the vast amounts of carbon dioxide belched from factory chimneys. That gas is causing a worldwide greenhouse effect that's melting the polar ice caps and raising ocean levels. And the fallout's getting much worse now that India and Brazil have started testing." She held her head in her hands. "All of which means—" I wished I dared take notes. "It means, among other violent things, that the world's topsoil soon will go right up in the air, the way it started to do back in Grapes of Wrath days of the 1930s. Much of the dust will be so fine it can't settle. Its particles will give piggyback rides into the lungs of animals and men for ozone, nitrogen oxide, sulfur compounds, and an especially noxious thing called peroxychloronitrate, or PAN for short. You remember the derivation of the word panic from the great god Pan. That's why I no longer talk for publication." She studied me closely. "You have a sore throat." "Everyone has a sore throat this fall." I caught a rasping breath as the meaning of her statement struck home. "A sore throat often foreruns emphysema or lung cancer. Throw away your silly nostril filters. Buy a gas mask and use it." "Won't the storms abate?" I persisted. "Not after they get a good start. If we have some good rains and an especially windless winter, the big blow may be postponed until next year, or perhaps even longer. Our government and the United Nations World Health Organization are doing everything humanly possible to prevent the disaster. But they've started too late. It's bound to come eventually. The pendulum has swung too far to be pushed back. After civilization is wiped out, things will come back to normal, of course, but that may take decades, or even centuries." There's no escape. I still wanted to believe that she was trying to scare me. Couldn't some people be quartered in mines where food could be stored and the air filtered? "The military has taken over the mines and has dug many subterranean caverns as well," she answered with a shrug. "I tried to tell them they might be trapped, but they wouldn't listen. Of course. No, Mr. Marvin of the Inquirer, the only safe place of refuge is on the continental shelf. Underwater." Unconsciously, I took a deep breath. "Yes, until the storms die and the oceans stop rising. That's the only place where there is abundant food." "You people can actually breathe underwater?" "Oxygen-enriched, pressurized water, yes. I've done it for weeks. You must have seen our recent reports." I didn't believe them. I felt half-strangled. Mice, maybe, but humans? I took my hand away from my throat with an effort. "How will you select your, finny friends?" "Noah had an easy time," she agreed with another of her rare smiles. "He took only his family and a few animals into the ark. We must get a better mix than that." "The Blue Book and Who's Who should help," I ventured. "I'm not stocking a museum with fossils," she snapped. Our project is designed to save fishermen, farmers, artisans, and a few intellectuals like yourself. Me? Somehow that last comment brought home the fact that this was no end of the world interview, but stark reality. You? You don't panic much. We need people like that. Maybe this thing will ease up for a time. If it worsens, though, communication will start breaking down. Keep me informed of worldwide developments. Give me a hand here at the office once in a while. We'll keep enlarging the Bahamas base as long as we can. I'll be going south often, and we'll need someone here that I can trust. No goodbye. She stood up, taller than I had thought, the body of a long-distance swimmer. Wear a mask, even if people laugh at you. We shook hands. I finished the science series, and Bowen assigned me to City Hall. Winter dragged in. When Hay was in New York, I found time to help and did my best to cheer her up. She proved to be well worth cheering. As days grew shorter, they became gloomier as well. By February, it was impossible to ignore that something had gone badly out of kilter. The mayor, as well as state and federal officials, issued vague assurances. Food stores ran out of stock frequently, water was severely rationed, and pipes often gurgled dryly when faucets were open. Yet the Hudson tubes flooded one day because of a sudden rise in the sea level. Sometimes the lights went out. March came in like a dusty lion. The choking, eye-smarting smog smog grew worse. Among other strange pranks, it reduced nylon hosiery and underthings to tatters. The dirt became appalling. Each day I left the office looking like a coal miner. The city twanged with tension. No one laughed at gas masks anymore. In fact, they were in terribly short supply. The base off Fort Lauderdale is fully equipped and stocked, Hay told me on the 15th. Tomorrow, folks start moving in for their conditioning. That will be the big test. Some of them won't be able to make the change. Do you think I can make it? Take a deep breath. Hold it. She counted slowly to 30 while spots formed before my popping eyes. Exhale. You'll be all right, I think. You'd better be, because I'd have cracked long since without your help. She stared at me, stricken. Oh, Lord, how I pity the millions of poor devils we can't help. Chapter 2. I fought my way to the office in a swirling hell. It was far worse than the London fog I had got caught in the 50s. People dashed past, their faces covered with wet cloths that made them into mummies. There was no sun. Streetlights gleamed faintly through the copper gloom. Dust devils danced and beckoned at corners. The stench of rotten eggs, hydrogen sulfide, was almost overwhelming. The city tried to continue its normal existence, but a feeling of terror gripped everyone. People who had been accustomed for so many years to consider smog an indicator of prosperity that no one need fear, at last faced the moment of truth. The storm got worse. The Inquirer was half isolated as telephone and teletype links kept breaking down. The air conditioner in the city room went out and we had to don masks. Around noon, Jimmy dashed through the murk waving a scrap of yellow paper he had torn off the news ticker. Look, Mr. Marvin, he tried to yell through his mask. Says here millions of people are storming Pennsylvania coal mines. Says the government is housing refugees in the pits. Says machine guns have been set up on the tipples. Pitched battles. Wow. Telegram for Mr. Marvin. A messenger in a dust-covered uniform staggered to my desk, coughing horribly. Come at once to Pier 9, Lauderdale, Norwith, the message read. Here's a chance to get that last article for the End of the World series. I shook the wire under Bowen's nose. Holy cow, excuse me. I can get into one of those underwater barracks off the Florida coast. They've been off limits for everyone. This is the world's biggest scoop. The fat man spooned up a mouthful of paste, chewed once, and spat it out. Full of grit. Okay, Ralph. Ask accounting for an advance. All planes are grounded. Take the staff auto. Get somebody to spell you driving. He rummaged an automatic out of his desk. There'll be fighting. Take this and don't hesitate to use it. Luck. He forgot me as he turned to shout directions about another extra. I grabbed Jimmy and we raced for the street. There we found the car almost buried in a dust drift. We dug it out and started. Jimmy at the wheel. I cuddled the gun. New York was hidden in brown mist. Street and store lights gleamed faintly. Our headlights cut the smog for only a few feet as we moved in packed traffic towards the Verrazano Bridge. Pedestrians struggled with the wind. Traffic policemen clung to their posts. Once, when we halted for a traffic light, a wild man sprang out of the gloom and scrabbled through the car window. "Gimme mask," he coughed rottenly. "Mask, for the love of God! Throat's on fire!" I showed my gun. The creature collapsed, clawing its mouth. "Don't stop any more for anything, Jimmy," I ordered as we got out of Staten Island and the tide of refugees thinned. We took turns driving south. Our stuffy masks and the fact that the windshield wouldn't stay clean created major hazards. To see anything ahead was next to impossible. On several occasions we narrowly escaped death at the hands of other half-blinded drivers. The smog thinned when we got below Washington, but the dust storm driving in from the west became worse. Gunk no longer smeared the windshield, but sand soon scoured it to uselessness and took all the paint off the car as well. Eventually the carburetor clogged. I stood guard in the midst of a rattled cotton field while Jimmy managed to clear the thing. Our first brush with refugees came at Beaufort, North Carolina. We stopped at a service station surrounded by abandoned cars and trucks. The pump was abandoned too, but we got it operating. The sky cleared momentarily, showing the sun as an orange ball, and instantly a horde of red-eyed spectators converged on us. We couldn't run for it until the tank was full. "Stand back," Jimmy yelled. "We got a gun." "Just a kid," croaked one of the ghosts. "Come on, guys." As they dashed for the car, I opened fire. The heavy automatic kicked high, but my first shot was lucky. A man fell and the others dissolved into the murk. I felt good as we drove away. Somewhere in Georgia, we ran into a new terror. The wind, a howling northern now, did its best to force us into the ditch. Grit invaded the car and cut like needles. Flashes of static leaped from the instrument board and windshield. The motor coughed like a smog sufferer. Then, striding out of the gloom, came a tornado. Its head was buried in the sky. Its foot swept the countryside like a broom. "It's going to hit us," Jimmy yelled. "Keep your head down." The thing struck like a battering ram. The car swerved, skidded, rolled. I slammed against the door handle and felt agony in my right shoulder. Miraculously, the car rolled over once more and landed on its tires. "Thought we were goners," Jimmy, stepping on the gas. I have a broken arm, I think. Tough, but I can drive the rest of the way. Florida bore no resemblance to the Sunshine State. As we inched with thousands of other refugee cars through St. Augustine, Daytona Beach, and West Palm Beach, the northern smog with its foul odors and throat-catching corrosives inched with us. El Norte sandblasted the palm trees, bending them double and sending great fronds swooping like birds across the road. Cars collided. Drivers cursed and fought. And just outside Fort Lauderdale, our luck broke completely when a Greyhound bus loomed out of nowhere and rode us down. Anything broken? I gasped when I recovered consciousness. I lay in the deserted living room of a farmhouse. Jimmy crouched beside me, his face streaked with dirty tears. I thought you sure were a goner that time, he croaked. Where's your mask? I asked through clenched teeth. My arm was one blazing misery, but otherwise I seemed all right. I lost it in the mashup. I've stuffed the window and door cracks with wet sheets so the smog doesn't bother me much. He bent double with a paroxysm of coughing. We can't stay here long. I listened to the storm, which sounded like the howling of demons. I know. There's a phone here, so I called the pier. It's only a mile or so. I got Dr. Norwith. She says somebody has blabbed and refugees are beginning to close in on the place. She doesn't dare leave in case of an attack. Told us to get here somehow and flash a light 4 times. Guards will let us in. You can't go without a mask. That stuff is about as potent as a Molotov cocktail. Sure I can. I'm tough. He pounded his chest to prove it, then turned away to hide another coughing spell. I can tie a wet cloth over my face, he conceded. If we go, Squirt, you'll wear my mask. Nope, you got a busted arm. That makes us even. We're pals, ain't we? Have to help each other. Jimmy was tough, so I agreed at last. Armed with an automatic and flash, we unsealed the door and plunged into the storm. The stinking wind snapped shut on us like teeth, ripping our clothes at the seams and flaying our skins. The ground in that unearthly half-light looked like an ill-kept tennis court. There was no vegetation left, such trees as remained having been stripped even of their bark by the gritty blast. At first we plowed ahead into the wind and through the dust drifts, but soon we lagged. Jimmy's wet cloth dried and was of little use. My arms sapped my strength. We would have lost the road had it not been for other dim figures. Those wandered toward the pier like things seen in a nightmare. Once a man came close enough to see my mask. He snatched at it. Jimmy fired. We went on alone for a time. Lights atop the pier winked briefly through a rift in the storm. That sight of safety finished Jimmy. He clutched at his throat and his knees buckled. You can make it now, Mr. Marvin, he whimpered. You gotta live. Miss Norworth needs you. I struggled with the clasps of my mask. They were clogged with grit and would not yield. Then, as I made up my mind to lie down beside Jimmy, I caught sight of a child's wagon which some prank of the storm had blown into a drift beside the street. Somehow I got Jimmy on it and started dragging him toward the waterfront. Twice I fell on the slippery dust and almost succumbed to the desire never to rise again, if it hadn't been for the boy. Ages passed and the pier gates loomed ahead, but between us and safety a ring of panting demons pressed against the barrier and screamed for admittance. Their faces had been lashed into lashed to bleeding pulp, their clothing cut to tatters, their eyes were red wells of terror. When I blinked the signal, those things that had been men scrambled toward us, shrieking, "Mask!" I dropped the light, snatched up the automatic with my good hand, and blazed away. Several attackers fell, but fear had lost its meaning. My mask was ripped apart. Smog pierced my lungs. I was thrown back against the wagon, scratched, trampled. Would those gates never... Chapter 3. I'm writing this in Hayes' windowless, whitewashed hospital suite. My arm's in a cast. Otherwise, I'll manage. Jimmy lies in the next bed. He has dust pneumonia, poor kid. But Hayes says he'll pull through. He must pull through. That boy has nerve that will be needed down here. Down here. 300 feet down on the ocean floor. And this is the only part of the base that's not flooded. Damned if everyone doesn't breathe water just like she told me. I can see the operating table next door. As soon as I'm pronounced fit, surgeons are coming to do things to my lungs, turn them into gills or something similar. Unless the storm above abates, of course. I love you, Hay, with your tired Mona Lisa smile. I wouldn't mind being a fish if absolutely necessary, and if you're around. But I do hope the storm stops. Well, that was an interesting story. All doom and gloom. I think it's because it's kind of got that doom and gloom feel to it. But it definitely was a little more science fiction than scary. It was definitely cool. It was definitely good, though. I really liked that one. All right. You can tell this is a lunchtime live because we were up to like 100 people and then it's dropped down to like 27, which is fine. It's just like everybody's going back to work. Oh, boy. Oh, you know what? I never clicked. Dang it. There we go. So now we're on the third story. It did end like it could have kept going. Well, thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, we have 2 stories left. So this one is called The Eye Above the Mantle by Frank Belknap Long. It was originally published in the United Amateur in March of 1921. Frank Belknap Long is well known in science fiction, like Weird Tales. Listening While You Mow. Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad I could provide you with entertainment. That's what I live for. So Frank Belknap Long is well known in the Weird Tales genre. Yeah. So let us begin. This one is The Eye Above the Mantle. I cannot recall to mind the precise place where we met, or even why we met. Perhaps we were assembled merely by chance, or perhaps we dared not consciously acknowledge the purpose which had brought us together. We had drunk a great deal of exceedingly rare and costly wine, and all sense of proportion had left us. We blasphemed openly and uttered prophecies and warnings which none but the gods have a right to utter. We also defied the little gods and made fun of their tinniness, which was unkind. It seems to me that we were all very young and students of a lore which has long since perished from the earth, even as the uninspired and mystic writings of the Chaldees have sunk into oblivion with the forgotten centuries. I know that we interested ourselves in evolution and speculated upon the creature which would some day take man's place upon this tiny planet of ours. That such a creature would come we had not the slightest doubt, and we merely discussed the way of his coming. But there was one among us who took no part in our conversation, but who sat with folded arms and smiling face, listening in silence to all which fell from our lips. He was tall and pale, and yet I cannot for my life describe him, or even hint at the unheard-of characters which marked him as one apart, and which made us fear him with a fear which was more than human, a fear which the Sphinx must have felt when the gods of Egypt went shrieking across the Nile to mingle with gods of Greece and the gods of Rome. Of his dress I remember nothing save that the tails of his coat were immoderately long and seemed to sweep the floor. We feared him, and yet we dared not openly show our fear. Our gestures were violent and affected, and our voices low and constrained. And we looked at him constantly, and yet continued to talk of the Superman. We continued to talk of the Superman who would some day come and destroy the pallid and feeble thing called Veer. And we thought of this Superman as some great insect with long hairy arms and a loathsome spider-like body, and we shuddered to think of that terrible day not so far distant when the old lord of the earth should stand naked and defenseless before the new and send up impotent shrieks to the quiet stars. It was at this point that the stranger arose and laughed. I cannot think that such a laugh was known to the Egyptians, or to the Medes, or the Persians, or to any of the lesser peoples who now dwell within the region of darkness. It was a laugh such as is only heard in the small hours of the night, when the gods are careless and no longer watch over the meditations and manifestations of man. And the stranger spoke, and his voice was the voice of a demon, but it was also the voice of an angel. And the stranger spoke, and his voice was unchaste, but it was holy. And I shuddered and drew my coat up over my ears that I might not hear the voice that seemed to tempt me away from myself. And the others did likewise. But the voice reached us through our clothes. As the eye is the window of the soul, so is the eye of this room the window to which is to come. Upon hearing this, we looked at one another, and our faces assumed expressions at once sinister and indescribable. There was but one window in that small room, and it was high up over a mantel of gold and onyx under a ceiling of white marble, and through it the pale light of the wan moon came in thin pencil-like rays. In a moment we had placed a chair against the wall, a red plush chair with the arms of black ebony, and were mounting the mantel. But the mantel was narrow and could not hold all of us. And seeing this, we became angry, and fought amongst ourselves, and quarreled for a place on the mantel. And finally, we decided to draw lots, draw lots, and let fate decide who should be the first to mount and to gaze through that little window which admitted the pale light of the wan moon in thin pencil-like rays. And so, one Agamemnon produced a set of jet-black dice, and for 5 minutes we gambled there under the little window to see who should be the first to mount. And may the gods who watch over my destiny be praised, I won. And to me was reserved the privilege and the right of being first, the first of all the children of men to look through that tiny window and to view all that lay beyond. And I mounted with glee, my heart beating within me, and my soul screaming with ecstasy. I mounted slowly, because the writings of Plith the Babylonian, the ancient and yellow scrolls of Plith, had taught me that haste injures bodily organs and destroys the faculties of the mind. At length I reached the little window and gazed out. I had expected to see a quiet Manhattan street with yellow and black automobiles sweeping noiselessly by, and gentle lamp-posts shedding melancholy beams upon the well-turned mustaches of pale passers-by, and over all the wan moon which had shed its pale rays into the little room below through the tiny window at which I was now gazing. But instead, I beheld an endless waste stretching out for miles and miles, a quiet, empty waste of gray sandstone, utterly bereft of every living thing. The singing of birds, the drone of insects, and the sighing of the wind against the trees, and against the houses of brick and the palaces of marble, all had ceased, because there were no birds or insects or wind or palaces of marble and houses of brick. For miles and miles the water stretched out and met the sky, and the sky was not blue but yellow, and shed a yellow light over the gray sandstone. The sky itself shed this light, because there was no sun, or indication that there ever had been a sun. The light came from the sky, from every part of the sky. From out of infinite space came that light. And there were no birds, or insects, or wind, or houses of brick and palaces of marble, but only the waste, endless, stretching away into infinity, crying out unto God. And a hideous sense of foreboding hung over me, and I groaned inwardly, and was about to turn away from the window. But something arose in the distance. Something white and terrible arose in the distance. From all sides it arose, they arose, myriad white things, and they came forward in even formation. They came forward from the place where the earth met the sky, and they marched with the sure and even step of an invading army. And when they came near, and I beheld them, I screamed in dismay. Oh, excuse me. For they were all white and tall, and were not like the men I knew. And then it dawned upon me with a fearful suddenness that these were not men at all, but were those of whom the Arabians wrote in letters of blood on secret tablets which have gone the way of all secret tablets. And I stood with my eyes glued to the window and watched them advance. I soon noticed that they were not all of the same size, and that the tallest commanded the less tall. I also noticed that they wore no clothes, but were covered with a kind of white fur, and that they were not ashamed of their nakedness. I also decided that their teeth were black, and their eyes red and inflamed. And then they came very near, almost under the window, and I could hear them talk. And they spoke neither the tongue of Greece, nor the tongue of Rome, neither the tongue of England, nor the tongue of France, but held discourse in a strange tongue which I could not understand, and which I did not wish to understand. And they kept coming, and coming, and filled up the whole great expanse of gray sandstone, and became a titanic sea of ever-moving white. And now they filled every square inch of all that land, and there was room for no more, and still some continued to come, crawling over the heads and shoulders of the others. And when at length they came no more, the yellow heavens went colorless, and the stars and the pale moon, which had shed its feeble mercuric light through the low window at which I now stood, became visible. And then someone below spoke a command. It was uttered in a low voice, and it lacked authority, and yet I knew that it would be obeyed. I knew that the command would be obeyed because it came from below, and I was not mistaken, for lo, as I stood there, a path was cleared among the multitude of white beings who swayed to and from under the colorless sky, and the pale moon and the quiet stars. And the path was a shocking path, very narrow and uneven, and ever in danger of being closed up by the angry white things that had made it. And the path extended from the windows to the place where the earth met the sky. Holy cow, I can't stop yawning for some reason. And I kept my face pressed to the window, watching the path. Of a sudden there arose on the horizon 4 white figures, but taller than any that had gone before, as tall as the Arabian goddess Aso, who rules over the hearts of all brave men. And these 4 figures came forward, and they carried with them a great thing of bronze and of iron, a great heavy thing of bronze and of iron that resembled nothing so much as a cage. And when they came very near, I saw that it was a cage, and I cried out to the gods of Seth and Sarminia to take forever from me my sight, that I might not behold the thing within that cage. For the thing within that cage was hideous to look upon, and was covered with foul yellow mud and dank Charonian vegetation. It uttered little feeble cries which reminded me of the cries which Heth had uttered when he had been attacked by the lampreys in his master's garden, and had suffered his blood to be drawn off in 18 different directions at the same time. But the gods of Seth and Sarminia heard me not, and my sight never left me, and I was forced to keep my eyes riveted upon the cage of iron and bronze and the loathsome thing within. And while I watched, the white creatures began to torture their captive with little sticks of wood, little sharp sticks which they held in their hands. They poked him in the fence, and hit him over the head and shoulders, and called him names which I knew were shocking because of the voice in which they were uttered. But strange to say, I felt sympathy only for myself, because the creature was too horrid to excite sympathy in either man or beast. And the moon and the stars looked down silently and said nothing. And the cries of the thing went up to the colorless heavens with no one to protest. How long I continued to watch them torture the thing I cannot tell, but it seems to me that for ages and ages, eons and eons, the cries rose up to the gods, and at length the light of the moon fell full upon the cage, and the thing within stood out in awful clearness. And now, as I write, my soul becomes delirious, and my heart volcanic, and my mind alone remains calm, for the thing within that cage. I am consumed with fire. I cannot write it. I cannot, this wretched soul, but enough. I will tell all. The thing within that cage was a man, and that man was Kunos, my dear, darling brother. Oh, God, the loathsome thing within, covered with dank Chironian vegetation, was flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. I tried to turn from the window. I sent up supplications to both the little gods and the big gods, and I even invoked the aid of the sinister and unchaste demon, Wroth, who dwells within the vile Dagon charnel house, and who is part ruler of Eid and no more. But my prayers were unanswered, and to me of all men was reserved the horrible fate of being forced to gaze upon the living disintegration of a loved one. And when at length it was over, and dear Kunos had gone his way into the endless void, the gods of Seth and Sarmenia, and of Rosath and Reynald gave me permission to leave the window. And with a shriek, which I did not recognize as my own, I jumped down from the mantel and screamed to my companions to cover me with their cloaks and to shield me from myself. But my companions heard me not, for my companions, alas, were beyond hearing. My companions were beyond hearing and seeing, and they neither heard my cries nor noticed the agony of my soul. Stretched out pale and motionless, they lay in a neat row upon the floor of white marble. Stretched out stiff and silent they lay. And upon the lips of each there was a smile, and upon the breast of each a little red spot, a little neat round red spot upon the breast of each. And then, with a fearful suddenness, it all came to me, and I knew that the Egyptians, the Medes, and the Assyrians, and the Persians were all more cunning than we, all infinitely more cunning than we, because they had known and had permitted their civilizations to sink into decay, and had left to the Celt and the Saxon the terrible menace of the Superman. And now I saw them standing there, the new lord of the universe, standing there quiet and silent and sinister over the bodies of those whom he had slain. And then he suddenly seemed to perceive that I was no longer at the window, and he smiled with a sweet smile, and spoke in a voice that was tender and soft. "You are the last of your kind, and I pity you. Go and live to revel in the glories of a civilization such as you have never known. Go, I say, and wander among the graves of your race, and if you so desire, write the history of my coming." And I obeyed. Hey, Emily, how are you? Hey, Tessa, I'm so glad that you stopped by. On lunch break. Very cool. I'm glad you stopped by. All right. So what did everybody think of that one? Yeah, I liked it. It was pretty good. Strange but good. Yeah, that's, I think, the best way to describe it. So we have about a half an hour left, which is just enough time for our last story. Yes, you guys did. That's amazing. Thank you so much. All right. So, this last story was written by a gentleman by the name of Robert E. Howard. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it is because Robert E. Howard is the creator of Conan the Barbarian. He's also, you may know, Kull the Conqueror and Bran MacMorn. And there's a handful of other characters that he created who have remained relevant throughout the last century. You guys are awesome. So this story is called The Thing on the Roof. They lumber through the night with their elephantine thread. I shudder in affright as I cower in my bed. They lift colossal wings on the high gable roofs, which tremble to the trample of their mastodonic hoofs. Justin Jeffrey, out of the old land. Let me begin by saying that I was surprised when Tussman called me. We had never been close friends. The man's mercenary instincts repelled me, and since our bitter controversy of 3 years before, when he attempted to discredit my evidences of Nahua culture in Yucatan, which was the result of years of careful research, our relations had been anything but cordial. However, I received him and found his manner hasty and abrupt, but rather abstracted, as if his dislike for me had been thrust aside in some driving passion that had hold of him. His errand was quickly stated. He wished my aid in obtaining a volume in the first edition of von Jung's Nameless Cults, the edition known as the Black Book, not from its color, but because of its dark contents. He might also as well have asked me for the original Greek translation of the Necronomicon, though since my return from the Yucatan I had devoted practically all my time to my avocation of book collecting, I had not stumbled onto any hint that the book in the Dusseldorf edition was still in existence. A word as to this rare work. Its extreme ambiguity in spots, coupled with its incredible subject matter, has caused it long to be regarded as the ravings of a maniac, and the author was damned with the brand of insanity. But the fact remains that much of his assertions were unanswerable, and that he spent the full 45 years of his life prying into strange places and discovering secret and abysmal things. Not a great many volumes were printed in the first edition, and many of these were burned by their frightened owners when von Juntz was found strangled in a mysterious manner in his barred and bolted chamber one night in 1840, 6 months after he had returned from a mysterious journey to Mongolia. 5 years later, a London printer, one Bridwell, pirated the work and issued a cheap translation for sensational effect, full of grotesque woodcuts and riddled with misspellings, faulty translations, and the usual errors of a cheap and unscholarly printing. This still further discredited the original work, and publishers and public forgot about the book until 1909, when the Golden Goblin Press of New York brought out an edition. Their production was so carefully expurgated that fully a fourth of the original matter was cut out. The book was handsomely bound and decorated with the exquisite and weirdly imaginative illustrations of Diego Vasquez. The edition was intended for popular consumption, but the artistic instinct of the publishers defeated that end, since the cost of reissuing the book was so great that they were forced to cite it at prohibitive price. I was explaining all this to Tussman when he interrupted brusquely to say that he was not utterly ignorant in such matters. One of the Golden Goblin books ornamented his library, he said, and it was in it that he found a certain line which aroused his interest. If I could procure him a copy of the original 1839 edition, he would make it worth my while. Knowing, he added, that it would be useless to offer me money, he would instead, in return for my trouble on his behalf, make a full retraction of his former accusations in regard to my Yucatan researches, and offer a complete apology in the scientific news. I will admit that I was astounded at this, and realized that if the matter meant so much to Tussman, that he was willing to make such concessions, it must indeed be of the utmost importance. I answered that I considered that I had sufficiently refuted his charges in the eyes of the world, and had no desire to put him in a humiliating position, but that I would make the utmost efforts to procure him what he wanted. He thanked me abruptly and took his leave, saying rather vaguely that he hoped to find a complete exposition of something in the Black Book which had evidently been slighted in the later edition. I set to work writing letters to friends, colleagues, and book dealers all over the world, and soon discovered that I had assumed a task of no small magnitude. 3 months elapsed before my efforts were crowned with success, but at last, through the aid of Professor James Clement of Richmond, Virginia, I was able to obtain what I wished. I notified Tussman, and he came to London by the next train. His eyes burned avidly as he gazed at the thick, dusty volume with its heavy leather covers and rusty iron hasps, and his fingertips quivered with eagerness as he thumbed the time-yellowed pages. And when he cried out fiercely and smashed his clenched fist down on the table, I knew that he had found what he hunted. "Listen," he commanded, and read to me a passage that spoke of an old temple in a Honduras jungle where a strange god was worshipped by an ancient tribe which became extinct before the coming of the Spaniards. And Tussman read aloud the mummy that had been, in life, the last high priest of that vanished people, and which now lay in a chamber hewn in the solid rock of the cliff against which the temple was built. About that mummy's withered neck was a copper chain, and on that chain a great red jewel carved in the form of a toad. This jewel was a key. Von Juntz went on to say that the treasure of the temple which lay hidden in a subterranean crypt far below the temple's altar. Tussman's eyes blazed. "I have seen that temple. I have stood before the altar. I have seen the sealed-up entrance of the chamber in which the natives say lies the mummy of the priest. It is a very curious temple." No more like the ruins of the prehistoric Indians than it is like the buildings of the modern Latin Americans. The Indians in the vicinity disclaim any former connection with the place. They say that the people who built that temple were a different race from themselves, and were there when their own ancestors came into the country. I believe it to be a remnant of some long-vanished civilization which began to decay thousands of years before the Spaniards came. I would like to have broken into the sealed-up chamber, but I had neither the time nor the tools for the task. I was hurrying to the coast and have been wounded by an accidental gunshot in the foot, and I stumbled onto the place purely by chance. I had been planning to have another look at it, but circumstances have prevented. Now I intend to let nothing stand in my way. By chance I came upon a passage in the Golden Goblin edition of this book describing the temple, but that was all. The mummy was only briefly mentioned. Interested, I obtained one of Bridewell's translations, but ran up against a blank wall of baffling blunders. By some irritating mischance, the translator had even mistaken the location of the Temple of the Toad, as von Yuntz calls it, and has it in Guatemala instead of Honduras. The general description is faulty. The key is mentioned, and the fact that it is a key, but a key to what? Bridewell's book does not state. I now felt that I was on the track of a real discovery, unless von Yuntz was, as many maintain, a madman. But that the man was actually in Honduras at one time is well attested, and no one could so vividly describe the temple as he does in the Black Book, unless he had seen it himself. How he learned of the jewel is more than I can say. The Indians who told me of the mummy said nothing of any jewel. I can only believe that von Yuntz found his way into the sealed crypt somehow. The man had uncanny ways of learning hidden things. To the best of my knowledge, only one other white man has seen the Temple of the Toad besides von Yuntz and myself, the Spanish traveler Juan Gonzalez, who made a partial exploration of that country in 1793. He mentioned briefly a curious fane that differed from most Indian ruins, and spoke skeptically of a legend current among the natives that there was something unusual hidden under the temple. I feel certain that he was referring to the Temple of the Toad. Tomorrow I sail for Central America. Keep the book. I have no more use for it. This time I am going fully prepared, and I intend to find what is hidden in that temple, if I have to demolish it. It can be nothing less than a great store of gold. The Spaniards missed it somehow when they arrived in Central America. The Temple of the Toad was deserted. They were searching for living Indians from whom torture could wring gold. Not for mummies of lost peoples, but I mean to have that treasure. So saying, Tussman took his departure. I sat down and opened the book at the place where he had left off reading, and I sat until midnight, wrapped in von Yuntz's curious, wild, and at times utterly vague expoundings. And I found pertaining to the Temple of the Toad certain things which disquieted me so much that the next morning I attempted to get in touch with Tussman, only to find that he had already sailed. Several months passed, and then I received a letter from Tussman, asking me to come and spend a few days with him at his estate in Sussex. He also requested me to bring the Black Book with me. I arrived at Tussman's rather isolated estate just after nightfall. He lived in almost feudal state, his great ivy-grown house and broad lawns surrounded by high stone walls. As I went up to the hedge-bordered way from the gate to the house, I noted that the place had not been well kept in its master's absence. Weeds grew rank among the trees, almost choking out the grass. Among some unkempt bushes over against the wall, I heard what appeared to be a horse or an ox blundering and lumbering about. I distinctly heard the clink of its hoof on a stone. A servant who eyed me suspiciously admitted me, and I found Tussman pacing to and fro in his study like a caged lion. His giant frame was leaner, harder than when I had last seen him. His face was bronzed by a tropic sun. There were more and harsher lines in his strong face, and his eyes burned more intensely than ever. A smoldering, baffled anger seemed to underlie his manner. "Well, Tussman," I greeted him, "what success? Did you find the gold?" "I found not an ounce of gold," he growled. "The whole thing was a hoax. Well, not all of it. I broke into the sealed chamber and found the mummy." "And the jewel?" I exclaimed. He drew something from his pocket and handed it to me. I gazed curiously at the thing I held. It was a great jewel, clear and transparent as crystal, but of a sinister crimson, carved as von Juntz had declared, in the shape of a toad. I shuddered voluntarily. The image was peculiarly repulsive. I turned my attention to the heavy and curiously wrought copper chain which supported it. "What are these characters carved on the chain?" I asked curiously. "I cannot say," Tussman replied. "I had thought perhaps you might know. I find a faint resemblance between them and certain partially defaced hieroglyphics on a monolith known as the Black Stone in the mountains of Hungary. I have been unable to decipher them." "Tell me of your trip," I urged, and over whiskey and sodas he began, as if with a strange reluctance. "I found the temple again, with no great difficulty, though it lies in a lonely and less frequented region. The temple is built against a sheer stone cliff in a deserted valley unknown to maps and explorers. I would not endeavor to make an estimate of its antiquity, but it is built of a sort of unusually hard basalt, such as I have never seen anywhere else, and its extreme weathering suggests an incredible age. Most of the columns which form its facade are in ruins, thrusting up shattered stumps from worn bases like the scattered and broken teeth of some grinning hag. The outer walls are crumbling, but the inner walls and the columns which support such of the roof as remains intact seem good for another 1,000 years, as well as the walls of the inner chamber. The main chamber is a large circular affair with a floor composed of great squares of stone. In the center stands the altar, merely a huge, round, curiously carved block of the same material. Directly behind the altar, in the solid stone cliff which forms the rear wall of the chamber, is the sealed and hewn-out chamber wherein lay the mummy of the temple's last priest. I broke into the crypt with not too much difficulty, and found the mummy exactly as is stated in the Black Book, though it was in a remarkable state of preservation. I was unable to classify it. The withered features and general contour of the skull suggested certain degraded and mongrel peoples of Lower Egypt, and I feel certain that the priest was a member of a race more akin to the Caucasian than the Indian. Beyond this, I cannot make any positive statement, but the jewel was there. The chain looped about the dried-up neck. From this point, Tussman's narrative became so vague that I had some difficulty in following him and wondered if the tropic sun had affected his mind. He had opened a hidden door in the altar somehow with the jewel. Just how, he did not plainly say, and it struck me that he did not clearly understand himself the action of the jewel key. But the opening of the secret door had had a bad effect on the hardy rogues in his employ. They had refused point-blank to follow him through that gaping black opening which had appeared so mysteriously when the gem was touched to the altar. Tussman entered alone with his pistol and electric torch, finding a narrow stone stair that wound down into the bowels of the earth, apparently. He followed this and presently came into a broad corridor in the blackness of which his tiny beam of light was almost engulfed. As he told this, he spoke with strange annoyance of a toad which hopped ahead of him, just beyond the circle of light, all the time he was below ground. Making his way along dank tunnels and stairways that were wells of solid blackness, he at last came to a heavy door fantastically carved, which he felt must be the crypt wherein was secreted the gold of the ancient worshippers. He pressed the toad jewel against it at several places, and finally the door gaped wide. "And the treasure?" I broke in eagerly. He laughed in savage mockery. "There was no gold there, no precious gems, nothing." He hesitated. "Nothing that I could bring away." Again his tale lapsed into vagueness. I hurriedly, without searching any further for the supposed treasure. He had intended to bring the mummy away with him, he said, to present to some museum, but when he came up out of the pits, it could not be found, and he believed that his men, in superstitious aversion to having such a companion on their road to the coast, had thrown it into some well or cavern. "And so," he concluded, "I am in England again, no richer than when I left." "You have the jewel," I reminded him. "Surely it is valuable." He eyed it without favor, but with a sort of fierce avidness, almost obsessional. "Would you say that it is a ruby?" he asked. I shook my head. "I am unable to classify it, but let me see the book." It is very dry in here today. Holy cow. He slowly turned the heavy pages, his lips moving as he read. Sometimes he shook his head as if puzzled, and I noticed him dwell long over a certain line. "This man dipped so deeply into forbidden things," said he. "I cannot wonder that his fate was so strange and mysterious. He must have had some foreboding of his end. Here he warns men not to disturb sleeping things." Tussman seemed lost in thought for some moments. "Aye, sleeping things," he muttered, "that seem dead but only lie waiting for some blind fool to awake them. I should have read further in the black book, and I should have shut the door when I left the crypt. But I have the key, and I'll keep it in spite of hell." He roused himself from his reveries and was about to speak when he stopped short. From somewhere upstairs had come a peculiar sound. "What was that?" He glared at me. I shook my head, and he ran to the door and shouted for a servant. The man entered a few moments later, and he was rather pale. "You were upstairs," growled Tussman. "Yes, sir." "Did you hear anything?" asked Tussman harshly, and in a manner almost threatening and accusing. "I did, sir," the man answered with a puzzled look on his face. "What did you hear?" The question was fairly snarled. "Well, sir," the man laughed apologetically, "you'll say I'm a bit off, I fear, but to tell you the truth, sir, it sounded like a horse stamping around on the roof." A blaze of absolute madness leapt into Tussman's eyes. "You fool!" he screamed. "Get out of here!" The man shrank back in amazement, and Tussman snatched up the gleaming toad-carved jewel. "I have been a fool," he raved. "I didn't read far enough, and I should have shut the door, but by heaven the key is mine, and I'll keep it in spite of man or devil." And with these strange words he turned and fled upstairs. A moment later his door slammed heavily, and a servant, knocking timidly, brought forth only a blasphemous order to retire and a luridly worded threat to shoot anyone who tried to obtain entrance into the room. Had it not been so late, I would have left the house, for I was certain that Tussman was stark mad. As it was, I retired to the room a frightened servant showed me, but I did not go to bed. I opened the pages of the black book at the place where Tussman had been reading. This much was evident. Unless the man was utterly insane, he had stumbled upon something unexpected in the Temple of the Toad. Something unnatural about the opening of the altar door had frightened his men, and in the subterraneous crypt Tussman had found something that he had not thought to find. And I believed that he had been followed from Central America, and that the reason for his persecution was the jewel he called the key. Seeking some clue in von Juntz's volume, I read again of the Temple of the Toad, of the strange pre-Indian people who were worshipped there, and of the huge, tittering, tentacled, hoofed monstrosity that they worshipped. Tussman had said that he had not read far enough when he had first seen the book. Puzzling over this cryptic phrase, I came upon the line he had pored over, marked by his thumbnail. It seemed to me to be another of von Juntz's many ambiguities, for it merely stated that a temple's god was the temple's treasure. Then the dark implication of the hint struck me, and cold sweat beaded my forehead. The key to the treasure, and the temple's treasure was the temple's god. And sleeping things might awaken on the opening of their prison door. I sprang up, unnerved by the intolerable suggestion. At that moment something crashed in the stillness, and the death scream of a human being burst upon my ears. In an instant I was out of the room, and as I dashed up the stairs I heard sounds that have made me doubt my sanity ever since. At Tussman's door I halted. Essaying with shaking hand to turn the knob, the door was locked, and as I hesitated I heard from within a hideous, high-pitched tittering, and then the disgusting squashy sound as if a great jelly-like bulk was being forced through the window. The sound ceased, and I could have sworn I heard a faint swish of gigantic wings. Then silence. Gathering my shattered nerves, I broke down the door. A foul and overpowering stench billowed out like a yellow mist. Gasping in nausea, I entered. The room was in ruins, but nothing was missing except that crimson toad-carved jewel Tussman called the key, and that was never found. A foul, unspeakable slime smeared the windowsill, and in the corner of the room lay Tussman, his head crushed and flattened, and on the red ruin of skull and face, the plain print of an enormous hoof. Well, that took us right to 2 o'clock. So what do you guys think of that one? Well, I'm glad you guys liked it. I'm really glad you guys liked the stories today, because like I said at the beginning, I kind of picked them at random, based on how long it was going to take me to read them. So, yeah. Well, this has been fun. I really appreciate all of you that stuck around. Yes, it did have a very mummy feel to it. I might need a nap, but I gotta call my daughter first in Liverpool. But I am so glad you guys showed up and stuck around. I appreciate you spending a couple of hours with me today. I appreciate that. Tomorrow I will be back on at my regular time of 9 p.m. Eastern Standard until 11 p.m. We'll be reading, most likely, Clive Barker's The Body Politic, which is a great story. Very disturbing and unsettling, but it is a great story. So, thank you. This has been a Trista. I gotcha. James Patterson. He's on my list. I promise. My birth is, there's no bash. It's just me and my bestie hanging out over the phone, and we'll probably just chit chat and make some art. And I have a hankering to do some sculpting tonight, so I'll probably bust out the Sculpey and the polymer clay and do some of that stuff. Yeah. So, thank you, Rita. I'm so glad you came. I hear you loud and clear, Trista. I don't blame you. Yeah. So thank you guys for being here. This has made my birthday a real treat. I'm so glad I got to spend a little bit of time with you. Well, as always, if you guys enjoy the stories and would like to support what I do here, please consider subscribing. You can go to my page and subscribe there, or there is the option to become a super fan. And actually, somebody did that yesterday, so I really appreciate that. But subscribed or not, I am just happy you're here. So again, I'll be back on at 9 p.m. tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow at my regular time with another story. So, until then, please be kind to each other. And be kind to yourself, because kindness matters. And so do you. Have a great day, everybody.